Chairman Mcdonald brings a diverse background to his office as Navajo chairman. Prior to his most recent election, he was chairman of the board and president of Dene Insurance Company and director of sales for Cataract Incorporated. And previously he held positions as chairman and founder of the Council of Energy Resource Tribes, co-founder of the American Indian National Bank, a member of President Reagan's Energy Policy Task Force, and a member of the board of directors of Great Western Bank and other corporations. He has received several awards for distinguished service. We are very pleased that he accepted our invitation, belated though it may be, to address us here today. Members and guests, please join me in welcoming the Chairman of the Navajo Nation, Peter McDonald.
Thank you very much, President Molson, esteemed members of the National Press Club, the Washington Press Corps, distinguished friends of the Navajo Nation from the House and Senate, and fellow Navajos over here at this table. We have our own Navajo Tribal Council members and staff of the Navajo Nation, our own Attorney General of the Navajo Nation, Mr. Michael Upshaw. First of all, I just like to say that it's really gratifying to be here today. I understand this is the first time in 50-year history of this press club luncheons that an Indian leader has been asked to speak. I'm honored to be able to speak to you, the media that informs the public and the policymakers of this nation. I'm also told that the last Indians who came here as guests was in 1907. This reminded me when I was asked to sign a press club guest book. Back in 1907, I understand the Indians who came here as guests signed a press club guest book with thumbprints. What a long way we have come. I use all 10 fingers on my Macintosh computer to draft this speech that I'm going to give this afternoon. We all know that the good Lord sometimes tests our faith. Well, it is hard enough to be a Navajo. It is even harder to be a Navajo Republican. But this past week, with the Wall Street crises, I hit the jackpot. Being a Navajo Republican who believes in the private sector, move over, Job. It's like the lady on the first Titanic, the lady on the Titanic who said, "I know I asked for ice, but this is ridiculous." Mr. Reagan, I know you wanted to test my party loyalty, but did you have to go this far? Seriously, I did get an interesting tip from an insider on Wall Street this past Friday. He said, quote, "One more week like this, the lower tip of Manhattan Island will be up for sale." So I gave him a buy order. When the price hits $24. But it's no deal unless I get the whole island. Well, let me begin by telling you about the three propositions I'm going to present to you today. Proposition 1, the Navajo Nation is ready, willing, and able to launch an all-out effort to produce the kind of economic self-sufficiency necessary for Indian self-determination. We have the key assets, and now at last we have our act together. Proposition 2, our trustee, the federal government, the BIA, these folks They ignore and in many instances undermine our economic effort for self-determination. I charge our trustee with undermining national policy and defaulting on its trust obligation with certain acts of omission and certain acts of commission. This brings me to a story that I heard. You know, each year, members of Indian tribe and Congress have hearings about the needs of the Indian tribes. One day, I understand, one of the congressmen got up, told the Indian chief that, "Chief, every year you come back here with your BIA friend asking for more money for over 100 years now. Tell me, Chief, why hasn't the BIA done anything? It's the same thing over and over." Well, the chief was lost for words for a while. Then he regrouped and said, "Well, I don't know how to tell you, but let me explain it this way. When General Custer was going to do battle on Little Bighorn, as his troops were marching at the fort 2 by 2s, he rode over to the BIA office, the Indian agent, and told the Indian agent, 'Don't you guys do anything until I come back.'" I understand Secretary Hodell's going to try to do something now. Well, Proposition 3, I'm going to announce an extraordinary development in our economic effort. My announcement involves a private sector leader and his commitment of private resources and leadership to a project of historic proportions on the Navajo lands. I make this announcement as part of a challenge to our trustee, to you, the media, and to the American people. We intend to demonstrate to this nation how market forces can be marshaled to remedy historic injustice, and together let us write a new and prouder chapter in this country's relation with First Americans. Today, the Navajo Nation is beginning anew with a quest for economic self-sufficiency as well as political maturity. Our goal is to exchange federal dependence for economic independence by building for the first time a private sector on our reservation. The concept of Indian business may sound a little unfamiliar. Remember, I'm the man who would like to be in an ad for American Express. So when a hostess asks if I'd like to have a reservation, I can say, "No thanks, lady. I'm the Navajo tribal chairman. I already have one." Proposition 1. The Navajo Nation is ready, willing, and able to become more than merely competitive as a location for the private sector. We are about the task of creating the most favorable economic climate to be found in the Sun Belt or anywhere else for business and industry. We, the Navajos, are the largest Indian tribe in America, with over 200,000 members. Almost 1 out of every 5 American Indians living on a reservation is a Navajo. We live on a reservation of 16 million acres. Earlier it was stated about the size of West Virginia. Those of you who are not familiar with the state of West Virginia, we live on a piece of land larger than Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Delaware all combined. It's located in the heart of the Sun Belt. Our lands contain rich reserves of minerals such as coal, uranium, oil, and natural gas. By law, we have priority rights to water in our region, and water rights are like gold in and around the Southwest. Our forests contain hundreds of thousands of acres of timber. Navajo Agricultural Product Industries is the largest private farm operation in the entire United States. Our workforce, Navajo workforce, is 100,000 strong. We are young, energetic, and talented. The Navajos are known worldwide for precision skills and meticulous craftsmanship. Those abilities were developed through weaving and silversmithing that is world famous. Today, these same abilities bring Navajos success in modern, high-tech industries. Our scenic beauty, traditional culture, and moderate climate create an awesome potential for tourism. There's only one Grand Canyon, and we have it. There's only one Canyon de Chelly. We have that too. There's only one Monument Valley. We got that too. There's only one Lake Powell. We got that too. And we hold these in trust for our people and for all Americans. All world-class scenic wonders, historic and cultural attractions, all at Navajo. Skiing, sailing, riding, camping, we can offer all of these. That is the promise that our lands hold. But that promise has not been realized yet. In the heart of the Sun Belt, barely 200 miles from Albuquerque, recently quoted as America's most livable city, lies an underdeveloped third world nation. The average annual Navajo per capita income is $2,400 per year, 72% below the national average. Approximately 85 cents out of every dollar earned on the reservation is spent elsewhere in border towns and communities all around us. Until we create a viable private sector, until we create jobs, our people must continue to depend on federal support for their day-to-day survival. Our people are young. The average age is 18, the age to start work or begin college. Our numbers are growing at a rate 3 times faster than the population of the United States. By the year 2000, we will reach 250,000 Navajo tribal members. Today, 40% of us on the Navajo reservation cannot find a job because there are no new jobs in the Navajo Nation. That is more than 6 times the national average. We are the first Americans. We want a chance to reach the so-called American dream. Yet, for more than a century, commercial time has stood still on the reservation. The federal government, our trustee, sought to protect us, to protect our natural resources, to protect our rights and our traditions. And in the process, we have been protected from the risk and rewards of the free market. The Navajo Nation has never been exposed to the natural forces of the supply and demand, and we have paid heavily for that insulation. In poverty, in a virtual freeze on development, in the lack of essential services. My goal is to create a thriving private sector to give our people the opportunity they deserve as Americans. To achieve that goal, I have set a challenge of bringing 1,000 new jobs a year to our reservation. This is the beginning of a new era for the Navajo people. On July 25th of this past year at the Navajo Economic Summit, leaders of government and industry spent a full day in the Navajo Nation addressing the development challenges of our tribe. The distinguished participants included Senators Daniel Inouye, Pete Domenici, Dennis DeConcini, Jeff Bingaman, and John McCain. United States Representatives Bill Richardson and John Kyle, John Rhodes and Howard Nielsen. State Governors Norman Bagender of Utah and Gary Carruthers of New Mexico. Business leaders, including fashion designer Oleg Cassini, Marmon Group Chairman and CEO Robert Pritzker, and General Dynamics President Oliver Beaulieu. Out of this remarkable day of discussion came a specific agenda for building a viable private sector at Navajo, for attracting the business and creating jobs. We've taken on every item on that agenda. I'm proud to report we are making great strides. The Navajo Nation will be the most attractive location for business growth in the United States of America. In the 3 short months since the Navajo Economic Summit, we have torn down the barriers of a century to create an unbeatable business climate. We have appropriated $30 million in tribal resources for the creation of a business and industrial development fund. We have slashed our business site leasing process to a streamlined minimum. We have developed an extremely attractive tax incentive program for the industry. As a sovereign tribal government, we are putting together tax and regulatory incentives that no state alone can offer. We are ready to match any incentive that a state may offer and then top it with financing for a new operation and identification of and training for the right employees. Today at the reservation, we are prepared to greet business the way it expects to be greeted. John Nasbick, author of the bestseller Megatrends, wrote, "Lawyers are like beavers. They dam up everything." Well, we've put together a dam-busting brigade. It's called the Commission for Accelerating Navajo Development Opportunities, or CAN-DO. It reports directly to me. CAN-DO is putting every serious business project on a fast track at Navajo. Professionals at CAN-DO can and do cut through any red tape, get the information a prospect needs, get the clearance, and make things happen. We are a nation that only yesterday sustained itself by herding sheep. There is, in effect, no Navajo word for free enterprise. But today, our young people have a contemporary mindset. They anticipate that it will take hard work. They accept the risk because nothing ventured, nothing gained, and they will settle for nothing less than giant strides forward. Our surrounding states now exhibit a new attitude, a new spirit of cooperation. For as long as tribal governments have existed, they have come into conflict with surrounding states. Overlapping jurisdictions and governmental responsibilities have led time and time again to costly litigation. An end is in sight. At the Navajo Economic Summit, Governor Gary Carruthers of New Mexico proposed that his state and the Navajo tribe enter into a far-reaching compact, providing for close cooperation across a wide range of common concerns. like economic development, tourism, education, and transportation. Governor Carruthers' proposal has served as a catalyst to forge a new partnership between New Mexico and the Navajo Nation, a partnership that will replace litigation with cooperation and mutual growth, a partnership that can serve as a model nationwide for tribes and states to work together. For the first time, we are telling the private sector, take a look at the Navajo Nation. Do business with us. Challenge us. We won't let you down. That's the good news. Now for the bad news, or Proposition 2. Our trustee is overprotecting us. I'm talking about BIA, the federal government. Our trustee does not seem to think we are, quote, ready yet to manage all of our own affairs. What does that mean in concrete terms? It means that according to our trustee, we are ready for some governmental powers, but not for others. In concrete terms, that overprotection means we can now issue tax-exempt bonds for public improvements, but we are not ready to issue industrial development bonds to create the kind of economy that can employ our people and provide basic revenue. We can participate in getting a share of certain block grant programs through our surrounding states, but we are not ready to receive block grants directly. We can get federal highway funds, but only if our trustee takes a large chunk off the top to maintain or administer those programs. More crucially, we have a trustee who urges us to be self-sufficient, but deprives us of the tools it can give us to create a private sector. First, we all know that the private sector will not do some things. It won't create the basic infrastructure like roads, schools, utility lines. That's the role of the public sector. That's the role our U.S. government takes on when we help build infrastructure in the lesser developed countries of the third world. It's a role that our trustee refuses to discharge as a basic function to a developing nation right here in the United States, the Navajo Nation. Second, we all know that the private sector's job is to provide investment capital for enterprises that show promise of making a profit. But we also know that it is the public sector's role to help insure against risk that scare private investors away. Overseas, we do that with the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC. Here at home, FDIC does it for the banking industry. We are learning the hard way that government may even have to play a stabilizing role when the stock market plunges. But our trustee doesn't seem to understand that the public sector has a corresponding role to play in making private investment possible on Indian reservations. Federal dollars are critical to the functioning of the World Bank and the Export-Import Bank. Why do they cease to flow to a domestic third world nation like the Navajo Nation? In short, ladies and gentlemen of the media, we have a trustee who doesn't understand that the trust relationship encompasses appropriate governmental participation in economic development. And so it puts stumbling blocks in our way, and it tries to subordinate us to the state governments. It floods us with regulations requirements, regulations, and more requirements. It fails to foster development. It actively hampers the ability of our tribal government to use federal funds with the flexibility that the state governments have. If Navajos could eat laws and regulations, no Navajo would go hungry. If roads on our reservation could be paved with regulations turned out by the BIA, we would not only have the best, but the longest highway system in the country. We have a trustee who doesn't understand private sector development, doesn't believe in it, and won't provide us with the public sector powers and resources known as essentials everywhere in the world. I'm pleased to announce that Senator Pete Domenici will introduce very shortly the Navajo Nation Economic Development Act in the 100th Congress. Senator Domenici understands what private sector development means. This act will contain incentives for business development. It will grant direct funding authority to the Navajo Nation government, where it is determined that the tribal government will be the most efficient provider of services to the Navajo people. It will give the Navajo Nation the ability to equip its people for private sector employment through more efficient job training and vocational training. This act singles out the Navajo reservation as a model for an experiment in tribal self-sufficiency. If it works, we will have taken a giant step forward in blazing the path for other smaller tribes with fewer resources and less access to the private sector. But I fully anticipate that the single greatest obstacle that legislation will face will be the opposition of our trustee, the BIA. I don't mean outright opposition. I mean it will raise concerns and questions. It will appear solicitous. It will ask whether this creates a precedent. It will protest that it is not fair unless every tribe is treated identically. And in the end, it could sabotage the most important initiative in economic development to be undertaken on any reservation in this country. We call on our trustee to embrace a 20th century understanding of a trust relationship, an understanding that comprehends economic development and economic self-sufficiency. In the 9 months I have held office, in the 3 months since the Navajo Economic Summit, we have lined up more than 20 companies ready to open plants or open new businesses on our reservation. The first one, the flagship enterprise, is the one I want to announce today. Oleg Cassini, the internationally renowned fashion designer, has agreed to lead a joint effort with the Navajo tribe to develop a world-class tourist destination resort on our tribal land. Mr. Cassini will be working with us to plan and design a luxury resort to reflect the unique culture and tradition of our people. Its architecture, furnishings, and decor will have a base in authentic Navajo designs. Its management and staff will come from the best of our Navajo workforce. Mr. Cassini will lend his fashion designs and concepts to manufacturers at Navajo. We will use them in making blue jeans, new interpretations of Navajo patterns in jewelry, in leather goods and furnishings. Shops in the resort complex will sell some of his most exclusive designs. Mr. Cassini's interest in the Navajo Nation goes back a long way. His study of Native American history drew him to Navajo 30 years ago. Back then, he wanted to develop an enterprise with us to create products based on his unique interpretation of Navajo design. 30 years ago, there was no Navajo structure to build on. Sadly for him and for us, he had to withdraw. How proud and fortunate we are to have Mr. Cassini back again. To Ole Cassini, our partner, and more accurately now, our brother, let us say thanks to you and your vision. Mr. Cassini has always been in the vanguard of leaders of design who can change the way a public thinks and sees, always for the better. With him, we will be able to show the world that Navajo is another word for quality. I'd like to introduce Mr. Cassini to you, for those of you who have not had the chance to know this extraordinary man. Oleg, you want to say a few words here?
Honestly, I wasn't prepared for anything of this kind. It's true that for many, many years I've been interested in the destiny of the American Indian, particularly the Navajos, because I thought they represented more than any other tribe the potential and the tragedy of a race that has been mistreated. Unlike other races, I had a situation of the kind, they never complained loudly enough, and that's been the fault of the Navajos. The first time I met Chairman McDonald, I realized that the Navajos had a leader that had the vision, it could negotiate with a white man. He dresses well, like a white man. He could have been dressed by me, by the way. But the fact is that he is an Indian, and I love him because he is an Indian. And you have to know that it's true. 30 years I spent in more. I lived once in a reservation to see how it was. The only thing that I imported was toilet paper, because cactus is so bad. But apart from this bad joke, that you will forgive me, which happened to be the truth, I did try at one point to interest the Kennedys, President Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, in the Indian plight and the necessity to do something, because I could see even those days that there was something terribly hard that could happen. Now, it's true that at the time, the Kennedys, like many other Americans, didn't know there were Indians left. They didn't think it was an important thing and never realized the political implications. But they were fast learners and people of good conscience, and they looked into the programs that could be helped, and they found themselves against the bureaucratic approach, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Matter of fact, I tell you that President Kennedy said to me, maybe laughingly, maybe you should be the head of the Indian Bureau, because maybe something will happen, because nothing will happen, as the chairman told you. Now, I apologize for an unprepared speech. It's not even a speech. I only want you to know that I'm honored to be here. I hope you'll be indulgent of what I had to say to you, and I revere the chairman, and I hope that this initiative will take place, because it's a great touristic possibility. I think the world will acknowledge that there is no greater beauty than what exists in the Navajo reservations. And having traveled all my life, a lot, trying to duck it, now I know that if this effort comes through, it will be the one spot in the world where every American will be proud of. There are already 10 million tourists that go, and they're not at all controlled. I believe that this project will be of such magnitude and such good taste that tourists from all over the world will come and spend some time in Navajo land. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cassini. Now for the challenge I mentioned when I began. We have come a long way, and this announcement is only one of many in the pipeline. But this announcement poses a challenge and a test. Will our trustee continue to deprive us of the basic tools and powers we need to mobilize market forces to remedy historic injustice? Will our trustees support or oppose efforts to provide us with direct block grants, with the power to issue industrial revenue bonds, with insurance to cover those risks which could deter private investors anywhere on the globe? Will our trustees understand that we are a third world economy right here in America's Sun Belt, that we have the potential to lure private capital and multinational corporations back to America? Will you, the media, help this nation to gain a new understanding of our people? Will you help us project an image that conveys not only the richness of our culture and the beauty of our land, but also an image of the energy and industry and the capacity of our people? Will you bring America good news about its own people, the first Americans, just as you have been willing to bring us news about the competitiveness of other lands and other peoples? And finally, let me challenge the American people. If we are to prove ourselves and the world that the Wall Street plunge is an aberration, that the American economy is sound because the basic productivity is there, then we must continue to invest in and support those basic productivity. I support those who say, buy American first and foremost. Buy American. But I add, buy first American. Buy Navajo. To those who say made in America must become once again a symbol of quality, I say made by Native Americans must, for the first time, become a symbol of justice, of honored, restored, of promises kept, and a trust renewed. That is my challenge. That is my pledge. Thank you very much.
Chairman McDonald, the first question is,